Welcome back, Purrfect Peeps, to Purrfect.dev. Today we're talking all about unlocking the Jamstack with Auth0. Today on the pod we have a special guest, James Q. Quick. What's up, James?
Hey.
What's up? What's going on?
Welcome.
Just hanging out. Got my COVID shot this morning, arm sore.
You did? Yeah, I was, the second one I was pretty sore from myself.
I'm hoping tomorrow goes better than today. It has already started, but other than that, just hanging out in Michigan, hoping for warm weather here.
Yeah, it's got to be nicer down there in Memphis, right?
The weather right now is perfect. Like the summers are miserable, but it's like pre-summer weather, so it's perfect right now. Yeah.
Nice.
I just did a half marathon down in Kentucky, and it was probably like the coldest day we could have picked for the half, which worked out well for me. But the vacation overall, I'm like, where's the warm weather at?
Yeah, really.
All this cold weather around. It's terrible.
I feel like running in colder weather is better for me than, like, I just get so exhausted so quickly when it's hot outside.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, same. Totally the same. I enjoy cool weather. Starting out at 36 was a little chilly, though.
Yeah, that's a little extreme.
So for those of you who don't know James yet, a little background. James is a developer, speaker, and teacher with a passion for web development. He's a developer advocate at Auth0 and has over 7 years of experience in advocacy and software development. In his spare time, he runs a YouTube channel, plays co-ed soccer with his wife, and spends time with his dogs and can solve a Rubik's Cube in under a minute. That is fascinating. And it's not on our description or our details here, but also you have a podcast that, someone might perfect pick a little bit later. We'll get to that.
Yeah, we'll check it out.
So thanks for joining us. We definitely want to talk about Jamstack and Auth0. And I think before I completely bury the lead, I got to know, how's Auth0 been after the acquisition?
The only information I have on that is just what's publicly available. So we've got a blog post that you can talk about. But just what we've been focused on is been kind of the same stuff. Just working on good content for the YouTube channel. I spent a lot of time doing video content there. So that's where I still been spending a lot of my time.
Okay, that's awesome. Who purchased it?
Okta.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Okta kind of brought in Auth0, and it's been interesting. It's been on everyone's ears, kind of listening on what's going to happen with that whole situation. So
nice.
Been pretty crazy. So for others who are just checking out Jamstack stuff, can you tell us a little bit more about what Auth0 is?
Yeah, there's a lot of different SaaS products out there that do individual things. Like some of my favorite ones, like Cloudinary for media management, and they do that really well. You've got a ton of different headless CMS options. You've got a ton of different things that do abstractions on top of databases. You've got tons of payment processing options. So Auth0 is just kind of in that same realm for authentication. We want to make adding authentication and doing it well as easy as possible for developers. So we've got SDKs for lots of different languages and frameworks. My favorite one that I've been talking about a lot recently and have some video content coming out on is the NextJS SDK. So I spent a lot of time with NextJS myself and have been really excited to see how that SDK has come out, evolved, and made it really I can't oversell this. I don't want to sound salesy, but you can literally add authentication in NextJS in a couple of minutes by basically installing the package and adding a few configuration variables. So it is I genuinely believe it's one of the best SDKs that's out there.
Yeah.
Wow, that's pretty cool. Is that handling both client side and server side then, or?
It does. Yeah, that's a great question. So this SDK specifically, it does the authentication part itself kind of server side, but you also have hooks on the front end to get access to the user. You get a loading state of whether or not it's trying to get the user's information. So while it's loading, you could show a loader or whatever. You can dynamically swap out your nav bar for a login, log out button, depending on if that user is there for you in that hook on the front end. So it really leverages the flexibility of Next.js really, really well, where you get all that server side authentication, you get the hooks on the front end, and then you get a couple of higher order functions to protect your pages in Next.js. So making sure that they're authenticated before they can get to a page, and or your API routes in Next.js too. So that stuff being built in is just really, really nice.
That's really nice.
Look, is that SDK like going to be a lot different than a normal like React SDK? The way it's written, is it super specific to Next then?
There's not a whole lot. So the hooks on the front end for getting access to the user, getting loading state, that sort of stuff, that's almost exactly like what you would see, or at least very similar to what you would see in our regular React SDK. So we have a separate one specific for React. So on that side, it's very similar. And then, some of the stuff is a little bit different and unique. Like I said, those higher order functions to protect either your pages or API routes, those are specific to Next.js. But I think it's not unique in the sense that it's not something that developers won't be comfortable with. I think, like, even if you're not a Next.js developer, like we probably have used SDKs that gives us hooks like that. So I think in that sense, it's pretty comfortable.
Does Auth0 have ones that are kind of comparable for things like Nuxt and other frameworks too?
Yeah, I figured we would have someone would go the other away from the React just to see what we cover. So we have an SDK for Angular, and then we have our more generic like SPA SDK. So you can use that. Like we've got Brittney, I know you like Svelte. We've got an internal project that I've worked on. You may have been on a stream for that, but the internal project that uses Svelte, so it uses the SPA.js package from Auth0.
Is that client side?
It is client side. Yep. Okay. And then we also have SDKs for backend languages and frameworks to do that as well. So you can kind of choose.
I wonder if that's going
makes the most sense.
Have to be switched up a little bit for Svelte Kit because now they're going to kind of go the pages route like Next.js. So I wonder.
Yeah, that'll be interesting. I don't know. I know in theory what Svelte Kit is. I have no actual experience, and I don't have any like roadmap information from an Auth0 standpoint. But I think we've done a good job so far of like prioritizing the SDKs that seem like they have the most use case, like specific ones. But then also providing, for example, like that SPA.js one where you can use it in any of the other ones that we haven't gotten to cover yet. So I think we've done a good job of kind of balancing the two.
Sounds good.
I think I've always kind of dealt with Auth0 in larger like corporate environments. Most of our listeners or our viewers are typically going to be on the smaller side of things. Do you find that both of those cases are kind of easy to deal with? Like it's easy to get started on a small scale and then you can grow as you need to using Auth0? Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, I want to earn as much. I want people to believe as much as what I say. So I want to like phrase this in a way where it's not just me being the Auth0 person. But yeah, like genuinely, if I were to start like a side project right now and I needed authentication, I would probably do that with Auth0 again, like doing a little bit of configuration in the dashboard and then having this Next.js SDK as an example that gives me flexibility, gets me started really quickly. Like that's what I would personally choose and have chosen. So we kind of referenced a podcast. We have a dashboard for Unsaid Podcast. And the dashboard, we want to let our guests and our sponsors log in, view stats from the episodes that they have either been a part of or sponsored, and then view like invoices and contracts and that sort of stuff. So that dashboard, Amy and I created with Next.js. So going back to familiar technologies that we're talking about, and used Auth0, and she tried out Auth0 as well as NextAuth, which is another really popular option. And I think luckily, or maybe not so luckily, but I'm thankful that she had a really positive experience with Auth0. She set it up really easily and was like, yeah, let's just do this. And I got to sit back and like silently go, yes, it worked.
I listened to that one today and she was like the non-biased person in the conversation. And she was like, yeah, compared to NextAuth, it was just so much simpler. Like you said, like 2 minutes, just bam, and it worked. Is there a cost out of the get-go with that? Or is there a free tier for Auth0?
Yep, definitely a free tier. Just, I mean, it's pretty common, like what you'd expect. I think as developers, like, at least from my perspective, like I'm probably not trying out something that I have to pay for initially. And I think a lot of us share that sentiment. So we absolutely have a free tier. I forget what the exact number is, but it's a pretty high number in terms of monthly active users. And to clarify what that means, oh, cool. Yeah, you got it right here. So monthly active users in this case is people that have actually logged in the last month. So you could have 100,000 users total, but only some portion of those are active in terms of log in every month. And I think you got it there, 7,000 external MAUs, monthly active users. So that 7,000 may actually be 20, 30, 40, or however many users. It just depends on how many are actually active by logging in the previous month.
I was a little lazy, so I'm going to jump back to this one. But here are the SDK libraries that we had up here. So just to kind of show people, like, there's so much here between spas and then web apps. Here's the Next.js guy there. And then all of this backend, which I find amazingly powerful, especially sitting in this node kind of setup as well. So all the mobile stuff. For me, when I compare this, I've been a Google Firebase user for years and a GDE, and so I always have to kind of compare those two products, if you will, right? So
fair enough.
In my mind, like Auth0 and Firebase's authentication package, they're very similar for the use case. I think you guys have a lot more like APIs spread across different SDKs. The one question I had was, when you guys are kind of in this space of authentication, do you ever think of going past that? Like, for instance, Firebase has like their database side to things, and you can protect your database. Is there any way to use that within like an Auth0 space where you're running microservices in this Jamstack world that we live in, so you can protect those things at that level too?
Yeah. So I want to clarify, like, I don't have any insider knowledge of future roadmaps in that regard. So I want to get that out of the way first. But I kind of don't think so. It would be it's certainly an understandable thought to look at something like Firebase. And I think like it's been so good for so many different people for so long that a developer that's going to create an app, that's almost, to your point, like kind of the standard they look at. Like, I could do this in Firebase with this amount of work. What is it going to look like, and what would be the reason for me to go somewhere else? So I understand that comparison, but I don't think we certainly don't have that suite of offering today, and nothing that I know of says that we will. But there are a couple of important features, I think, of the existing platform that are useful. One is our rules, which actually I think do become serverless functions, but it's not something that you actually like control and deploy and that kind of stuff. We give you an editor, and you can put your code in there. And what it does is allows you to kind of do specific things after post login. So after a user logs in, do you want to add some information to their ID token? Do you want to ping your phone to let you know that someone like whatever it is that you want to do, you have the ability with that. And then we are getting ready for our actions release, which is kind of a beefed up version of that. It's got an editor in the browser, which uses Monaco, or it's built on top of Monaco. You get IntelliSense and NPM packages and environment variables, all sorts of stuff, in addition to like different aspects of the login lifecycle. So like pre-login, post-login, that sort of stuff. So I think that's one of our big differentiators in general with authentication, is the ability to, like, if we don't have something out of the box, most likely you can add that functionality yourself through what is rules now and what will be actions coming out soon.
That speaks a little bit to our topic, Jamstack, too, where you have these headless options that you can pull in and use the best in class or use whatever you're familiar with, and you don't have to pick one thing anymore. You can go whatever direction and pull in what you need, which is great about Jamstack. Yeah,
that's kind of like we can maybe kind of approach that topic now. That's my interpretation of the Jamstack. Like the formal one is the acronym JavaScript, APIs, and markup. And like neither one of those things is really unique or new in and of itself, right? Like we've had JavaScript for a long time. We all work with APIs. We have markup, whether it's HTML or Markdown or JSON or whatever we want to use for that. The difference with the Jamstack is now we're just getting a lot more creative about how we combine these different technologies, these different services, these different concepts. So I think that is exactly what you said. Like we see more and more SaaS products that have started up that do individual things really well. And as a developer now, or as an entrepreneur, if I want to build a product, I no longer have to build all these things myself. I can pull in these individual services that do parts really well and then build the thing that makes my product actually unique, or that makes that, like, whatever the money maker is for my product, that's what I get to focus my the majority of my time on.
Exactly. I've stopped thinking about Jamstack as JavaScript APIs and markup, and more just as it's this mindset, this architecture of how we can pull in these things.
Absolutely.
So one thing that I wanted to bring up, and hopefully you have some background in it, the Node.js SDK version 2 just came out, probably like a month ago or a month and a half ago. With that release, they now have full support for JWK and JWS. I kind of, for our listeners who are not used to like authentication, authorization, can we talk about like what is AuthN versus what is AuthZ, and kind of these newer changes that are coming down the pipe, if you will, and how we can access that?
Yeah, you kind of freaked me out for a second, because I don't ever use, like, this is not a bad thing, but I don't ever use like AuthN and AuthZ. And I was like scrambling. I was like, what are those words? But we're on the same page. I got where you're going. So for a little bit of
listeners, maybe
go ahead.
AuthN is authentication and AuthZ is authorization. So if we can talk about, let's do AuthN first and what that actually means.
Yeah, absolutely. Now my nerves are coming back down now from being put on the spot. So authentication is really just kind of proving who you are. And you think about, like, anytime you log into an app, whether it be through like username, password, email password, through a social provider like Google, Twitter, Facebook, GitHub, Discord, whatever, you have some way of proving that you are who you are. Typically that's like credentials, right? Like that's what we're most used to. And that stuff is kind of ever evolving. And I think there's thoughts of a world where passwords don't exist anymore. It seems really, really wild to think about now. And that's kind of a separate story. But authentication is just being able to prove that you are who you say you are based on something. And it's right now mostly just credentials that you would pass along to an authentication provider of some sort.
So are we talking about like 2FA taking over that space?
2FA being, well, I guess like the mechanisms of 2FA, because 2FA right now would be like you log in and then they want to add something on top of that. So you still would have to have that password, but those mechanisms of like sending a magic link to your email or logging in with like some sort of hardware device that you have, like lots of different options that don't necessarily require a password at all. So 2FA would be like applying it on top of already existing password. The future seems to potentially be, there's no certainties here, but maybe there's no passwords at all.
Yeah, I know I have a password for Discord, but I can use my phone and log in with that QR code.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
I could not remember my Discord password. So
I feel like it's a little interesting though, because there's so many applications that currently still require it. It's kind of one of these, you're going to have to bring a lot of people up to this kind of newer thought or newer world. I don't know how long that's going to take.
Agreed.
So we fully covered AuthN, and maybe you covered it, I missed it, but the AuthZ side of this, that is a side of the story that maybe Auth0 doesn't really handle. They're more focused on the AuthN side, right?
Probably not quite true. So let's start with that's a good it's good to talk that through. But let's start with for my calming of nerves. AuthZ is authorization. And the difference between authentication, which is proving who you are, authorization is now, do you have access to do the thing that you're trying to do? And the example of this is like for going back to the dashboard that I talked about earlier, you might have two different types of users, a guest and a sponsor. So if I'm a guest and I log in, I can be authenticated and I can be authorized to have access to the guest page, my guest page with my numbers, my, not invoices, but whatever details are there. But if I try to go to like a sponsors page, like not just the public list of sponsors, but the detail, like the contracts and the analytics for the sponsor itself, I'm not authorized to go there. So there's got to be some sort of check that like, not only am I logged in, but I need something about me somewhere that proves that I also have access to do this thing. And Alex, you mentioned like the idea of Firebase, again, like such a common one for people. Firebase is really interesting. And it took me a while to understand this. You don't you often don't have a private API key of some sort. You can do all of your database interactions right from the browser. And the reason that works is because you have authorization baked in. So you use authentication to get an actual user, and then you have some sort of authorization rules on the back end that you configure. Hey, you can only read this information if you created it. You can only edit this information if you're the owner of that record. You can only delete it if you're the owner of that record, that sort of stuff.
One tricky thing there on the Firebase side, there's so many individuals that left their databases wide open for so long that it kind of became a problem, right? So although it's super easy to like pull those things in, you still have to like work on your own authorization pieces to that. So folks out there, if you're using it, please lock your databases.
Go back it. Yeah. And I think lots of us as content creators, we do this all the time, right? We do a demo to teach people and we're like, oh, we'll just leave it open for testing. But then unless we really clarify and say exactly what you just said, like, hey, this is just for testing, make sure, blah, blah, blah. And it's the same thing with like when people use environment variables in demos, like they say, all right, copy your API key right here. I didn't know this for like years that those things can't be checked in to GitHub, right? Or the like can't be included in code that gets shipped to the browser. And that's a whole, like I try to be very explicit with those types of things in my videos for that exact reason. But going back to authorization, like, do you have access to do a certain thing, and the tie-in with Auth0? So we have permissions, so you can list out permissions or create permissions in a dashboard in Auth0. Permissions a lot of times get pretty fine grained. So if you think about some sort of domain of objects that you work with, let's say it's a podcast. Do you have the ability to create a podcast, to edit a podcast, to delete a podcast, to read a podcast? Those are the 4 of CRUD. So those might be individual permissions. And then you might also have another set of permissions that's basically the same thing, but then it's like tacked on, like, do you have the ability to read all podcasts? Do you have the ability to read podcasts that you created? Do you have the ability to create or delete record podcasts that someone else created? So there's all these really fine-grained permissions that you can have. And because those can be so many, you have the ability to group those into roles in Auth0 as well. So you can assign a list of permissions to a given role, give a user a role, include that role in their ID token and or access token, and then make decisions on your logic based on what comes in those tokens of what they should have access to.
That sounds really nice. Are those JSON web tokens? I've just heard the JWT like acronym, all these acronyms.
all the acronyms. Yes. JWT is JSON web token. If you go like deeper into the specs of how these things work, an ID token is specified to be a JSON web token, a JWT. An access token is not. So there's two different formats that we use for our access token. One is an actual JSON web token, which means you can decode the information that's in it. Another just shout out for people, like, you shouldn't be like giving away access tokens, and you shouldn't be storing private information in them. And then
those in localhost, folks. That's what he's saying.
And there's actually interesting. You can do. People out there can go and do research. There's like research on whether or not, as long as you're doing certain things to protect yourself against cross-site scripting, whether that's a bad thing. And then you can get into refresh tokens and a whole different thing. But you should be conscious of the impact of having a JWT out there that people could potentially find and use. So that's one format. The other format is just basically like a unique identifier that gets sent to the authorization server, and they can use that to go and get information about the user instead of that info being baked into the JWT token itself.
Nice.
Yeah, and the cool part with the JWT side of that is, like, it has the signature and like the header built into it, but it also provides a ton of information about a user. So you can also assure like the information that's sitting in there that flows back and forth, that you can actually trust it, and you don't have to like rely on this second party. Like, okay, now I've hit the server, now make sure the server goes and checks the authorization again, and it becomes kind of a slower process to put all that together. So it's definitely cool. If you haven't checked out JWTs or JOTs, as people constantly correct me on, which
I've never understood that one.
But don't either.
Yeah. I don't get that
in there, but okay. So yeah, check out JSON web tokens. Am I putting you on the spot a little bit if we talk about JWKs? Can you kind of talk about what a
maybe
set is?
Okay. So, well,
if you can, that's fine. Like, we're getting a little deep. I know.
Yeah, I want to make sure that I'm getting the right thing. So we have in Auth0 and like part of, I think one of the specs for maybe OpenID Connect is this ability to have you have a publicly available endpoint for keys that are associated, public-private keys that are associated with how JWTs are signed. So the beauty of the tokens, you kind of alluded to this, but it's really kind of, lack of a different word, like beautiful the way this works. JWTs have information that are in them and they're signed and they have that verify signature at the bottom. That verify signature uniquely represents what was in, or the combination of the header and the payload, which is kind of in this case, the user information. And it takes that stuff and it encrypts it. And then that header that signature has to be valid. When you then check, if I receive a token, I need to have either the original signing key or a public-private key pair that I can use, and then make the header for the information that I get. Make the signature for the information that I get, and compare that with the signature that's inside of that token. So what that gives us the ability to do is really accept, if I get a token and I validate it, I know this token hasn't been tampered with, and I know it came from the source that I trust. So I can trust the information that's inside of it. So the key set is now the ability for, like, if I'm an API server, I receive a token, I can do some asking by going to this key set endpoint to get the appropriate key to then test that JWT is valid when I receive it. Again, after that validation, then I can trust the information and use that to make authentication and or authorization decisions based on the information that's inside of it.
Beautiful.
I haven't dealt with authorization much, but is that where like hashing and salting comes in? Is that how those are compared? And
so let's see. Encryption in general, there's one-way and two-way encryption. Two-way encryption means you can encrypt something and you can decrypt something. So if you look at like the actual JWT itself is comprised of 3 different parts. It's encrypted information that can then be decrypted by knowing the algorithm. So you can actually see all the information that's inside of it. The other aspect of encryption is one-way encryption, where you're taking something, you're more appropriately like hashing it, and there's no real way to go back from a hash to the original value.
And that's SSH, right? That's how is that how SSH works?
If you're talking about like public-private key pairs, like SSH keys, that kind of stuff, is that what you mean? Yeah. Yep. So they work on the public-private key, and this gets into some things that I honestly don't know that well.
Yeah,
somehow
we're getting a little deep in that.
Yeah. Somehow you have this one thing, and then you have its partner, and then both of them can be used to more or less hash, in this case, the stuff that's inside the JWT, to create that signature and then compare them against each other.
Okay, that kind of makes sense.
Yeah. And then you're going back to, you mentioned hashing and salting. That would go into your passwords for a user, like not storing them. Rule number 1 for people out there: if you're doing authentication yourself, don't store your passwords in plain text. You would hash them, but then there's hackers are really smart, and they've been doing this for a long time. So they have what are called like rainbow tables, basically where they can kind of guess if you use a certain hashing algorithm. Here's 1 million of the most common passwords in the world. Run those through these common hashing algorithms. And then if they get access to your database, they can just go see if what their hash is in your database. They know how to go backwards because they did it. So salting then adds on some additional things to make it that much more harder, that much more difficult to go backwards, almost impossible to go backwards.
Nice. Thank you for clarifying that.
Now that like our complete interview is over, I think we'll just give you the job. I think you know enough.
Yeah,
Sorry, I didn't mean to beat you up so much on all these questions.
It's all good. Yeah, no, it's good.
So when we talk about, again, just circling back to I always forget our title, about halfway through the pod because I just love talking to people about all this stuff all the time. But the title being Unlocking the Jamstack with Auth0. Do you kind of see Auth0 being probably one of the key players at this point? I think we named, Firebase, Auth0. Is there any others that kind of fit in there for our Jamstack story?
There's lots. It's one of those things. Once people see success in a given area, then you're going to see a lot more products come up. So I don't know AWS intimately, but there's like AWS Incognito. There's Microsoft Azure Identity. That's probably not the right word, so nobody quote me on that. But they have authentication stuff that's built in. One thing that's been really interesting for me recently is a Firebase, an open source alternative to Firebase, which is Supabase. It sounds really cool. They've got authentication built in. And then if you look at across the board on a lot of these like headless CMS options, they've got authentication baked in too. Keystone.js, I went through Wes Boss's course on advanced React. Keystone has authentication. You've got tons of different options. I would say like we are definitely one of the big players of not only easy to get started with, but also when you scale up to what we were talking about earlier, and you're doing enterprise security and you really want some extra features that would take you, if you were to do it yourself, a long time and a lot of expertise that you may not have. That's where we really shine. So getting people, like from my perspective in DevRel, like showing people that it's easy to work with, showing people how it can enable you to build stuff quicker. And then other people have deeper conversations about very specific use cases, deeper functionality, and very like much more technical conversations than we've had so far about how to do this stuff the right way based on specifications and that sort of stuff. So yeah, lots of different options. They have their different use cases, but I think we do a good job of making it accessible to the average developer. And then when you get into bigger companies, bigger products, enterprises, being able to meet all of those needs as well.
Yeah, very well said. Do you find between the different products, I know you probably don't have a ton of experience across them, do you find that there's limitations when you start saying, well, we need a Facebook login, whatever, it might be Google login, all those different logins. I know Apple has released kind of some very strict guidelines when you're writing an app and it has an Apple login or wants to be in a Play Store, it has to have an Apple login. Are there any things in there across those different products that maybe that one doesn't do better than the other, but there's kind of that segment is better covered across and being able to do like back end and front end and all of that by using those different logins?
Yeah, I probably don't have the best answer, but I'll give you a couple of things I think are relevant. I think a lot of these different options that we have do make it easy to facilitate authenticating against either their own email password or username password, as well as some social providers. So the social provider interaction, the way this usually works, regardless of what you're using, is you go to that platform, you register an application on that platform, they give you some sort of credentials, and then you use those in whatever tool you're using, and then it kind of takes care of the rest. So Auth0, I think we do that really well. I think other people do too. One of the interesting features that we do have though is the ability to merge these profiles. So we've all probably logged in with something a long time ago with Facebook. And then after a while, for me, I was like, everything developer related, I'm either logging in with Twitter or GitHub. And then I go back to that app and I log in with GitHub, and it's got the same email as my Facebook one, but these are two completely different accounts in their eyes. So I can't remember what it was. Oh, it's IFTTT, if this, then that. Mm-hmm. I logged in because I have some sort of automation that's still running, and I can't figure out for the life of me which account it's running under. So I'm logging in with Facebook. Nope, log out, log in with Google. And so one of the cool features that we do have is the ability to merge those profiles. So if it sees that there are different connections, different social connections with the same email, you can facilitate a way for the user to say, yeah, go ahead and merge those and then log in with either one, but still have the same user account and data. So in terms of one specific feature that is really nice that facilitates from a user perspective, some things like that. Yeah, I think that is one of the pretty neat ones.
That is really nice. And does that then equal one user instead of like being multiple users on your for your pricing plan? Nice. And bringing back.
Actually, sorry, but I didn't realize
Oh,
you were
you're
going to
fine.
clarify pricing. I don't know. I don't know that for sure.
You're not
So
sure?
let me make sure I cover myself. I don't know
Right.
the answer to that very specifically.
Okay. Yeah. And bringing back in the Jamstack a little bit too, if we picked Auth0 and you go down that route, how does that merge and go with CMSs and things that we pull in? How well do they go together? And do they fight each other at all?
Yeah. They're I think the easy answer is you can use Auth0 with any of them. A lot of them don't necessarily provide authentication like as a platform itself. So I use Sanity.io for a lot of my content. It doesn't have the ability to like set up authentication for users in terms of the application. Like you can share your backend Sanity dashboard with other people, but they don't have the ability to facilitate like, I want to add authentication to my app and I get that from Sanity. Okay. So what I would do in that case, and this is true for lots, I've done demos like this with FaunaDB and Airtable, which is a really cool like visual database that has a really good API as well, is I have my application. When a user logs in, you get in the ID token, which is general user information, you get a sub property. The sub property is the unique identifier for the user. And this is based on the specification for ID tokens. That's going to be your user ID. And what I would do is like, if I was in NextJS, if I'm on the front end and I need to save a piece of data, it sends that information to the back end in NextJS. I take the authenticated user, shout out to our SDK, makes getting that user really easy. But you grab that user, you grab their sub property, and then you attach that to whatever item you're creating. Okay. And then when you save it to your database, whatever headless CMS you want, you've got that sub property, the unique identifier, you've got the ability, or you've got that thing saved with it and the ability to tie it back to a user. So now if I log in, now I can go and query, hey, give me all items in whatever CMS, whatever database it is that have the matching sub property to me, the logged in user. Another example that's actually really neat is, this is not all of them, but FaunaDB can actually, you can do authorization rules similar to how you would in Firebase. You can do authorization rules inside of the FaunaDB dashboard, and you can configure it to where the access token that you get from Auth0, if you pass that along to FaunaDB, it knows what to do with that and how to validate it. And then based on the authorization, got to clarify, the authorization rules that you have set up there, that can more or less replace your need for even your API endpoints in Next. Like you don't necessarily have to have a backend for the same reason as Firebase. You can make your request directly to Fauna from the front end, pass along that access token. Fauna knows what to do with that thing if you set it up correctly. And then based on Fauna's rules, will allow a certain interaction to happen or not. So there's a couple of, there's the ability to take advantage of certain features of different either databases or CMSs. The easy answer is probably for every one of these, you can take the sub property, attach it to whatever object you're creating, and then save that in that data store.
Yeah, it sounds like it fits perfect into the Jamstack.
Yeah.
Works well with anything. Awesome.
The cool part is like once you know one of those, everything that James is talking about, it's identical for Firebase. Yeah. It's identical in Amazon. So it's really great once you kind of understand all of the different AuthN kind of features and what's going into them. Yeah. So for any of those out there, I know we don't have a ton of live listeners here, but if you have Q&A, we're going to do some perfect picks next. But ask your questions and we'll answer them at the very end if we have any. So James was kind enough to do a perfect pick for us today. Do you want to kick off yours first, James?
Yeah. Oh, there it is. Okay. I couldn't remember if I was supposed to do two or not, but yes. So this one on camera, and you've got the Amazon link up. This is, I actually have the 2 terabyte version. It's a 2 terabyte SSD. And for those of you who don't really know me, I do a lot of video content, a lot of YouTube content. So I've got gigs and gigs and gigs every day of video and video project editing files and that sort of stuff. And I only have so much room on my computer. So I carry this ruggedized 2 terabyte SSD. If I was traveling, it would make more sense. But I carry it with me everywhere I go. It's USB-C, so I can plug it directly into my Mac. It's 2 terabytes. Obviously, I can store a ton on there. And it's super fast to the point where I can actually edit right from this drive. So I don't even have to copy things over to my computer to then edit. I can just do it right from the drive itself, carry it with me. It's ruggedized. If I drop it, it's okay. It has a little, like the little hook or the carabiner or whatever. So you could like clip it to your backpack. Anyway, so it's really, really nice. It was well worth the investment from my perspective as a content creator.
That's really nice.
That's amazing.
What do you use for editing?
I use ScreenFlow most of the time. We use Premiere at work. So sometimes I'll go into Premiere and probably should spend more time practicing in Premiere to get a little more proficient. But ScreenFlow is what I use for most of my stuff.
Nice.
That's awesome. We use a Google Drive to back everything up to, and it used to be unlimited once I had so many people. I'm kind of curious like where that sits today because they've changed a lot of their pricing. So we'll see how that goes. But cool. Brittney, you have the next pick.
Yeah. So my next pick is the podcast that we have been hinting at the whole show. So CompressedFM is James's podcast with Amy Dutton, and it just released a couple weeks ago at the time of recording. I don't know when this will actually go out to Anchor for podcast, but it's really great. They go through design, development stuff, and you get to hear their origin stories, which was really informative today. I heard things that are familiar to me with Udemy in there, that you got your start on Udemy.
Yep.
And you talked about automation too, and all the automation tools that you guys use and your picks. Describe.to, is that one that Amy picked for the transcription that you guys use?
Oh, Descript is
Descript. That's Descript.
Yeah. So it's really cool.
Awesome.
It can do the transcriptions like you're saying, and it also, you can tell it to just like splice out dead silence, and you can tell it to splice out ums. So if you really just want to wipe those out, like I think it's like a one click to do that. And then you get that transcription, so you can actually select a portion of the video by selecting the text that you want. So when we've talked about doing like highlighting little snippets for promo on social, you can do that by selecting the text. So you're not having to go in and like zoom in on a timeline. You can get exactly the words that you want, which is really, really cool.
That is really cool. And in Amy's story, she said she worked on Kelly Clarkson's website, and I was sold right there. I'm like super fan of Kelly Clarkson. So I was like, okay, we're good. I'm going to keep listening to this.
That's right. I'm glad. I'll have to tell Amy that she sold you on the shout outs for the celebrities that she's worked on or worked with. And just wanted to add like another shout out for Amy. So you said like James's podcast, like Amy's done so much of this that I want to give her like, no, it's not a bad thing at all. Like we're talking, so I think it makes sense, but I just want to give Amy like a double, triple shout out because she's done so much of the design work, the development work, the like packaging it all up together. She's done amazing. So it's been really, really a joy to work with her.
Absolutely. Yeah. Give both of you credit.
Very cool.
Yeah. And my second pick there, sorry, is the Learn, Build, Teach community. I think this is James's site, jamesqquick.com. But we have a community on Discord called Learn, Build, Teach. And we have a huge group and growing every day of content creators, people learning. I mean, everything in there. We have webhooks where you can share out your posts, promote them. I mean, there's so much in that community. So I definitely recommend going to check that out and adding that Discord to your list.
Awesome. My picks are next. So my first pick is Google I/O. Since we're live, I can throw this one out here. If you're listening on repeat, I apologize. It's probably already over. But they have this really fun, I don't even know where it's at now. Oh, there it is. You got to scroll all the way to the bottom, and they have this fun little Pong thing. And once you finish it at the end, it actually fills out a little something. I won't give it away. That you can do. I'll just say that. So check it out, figure it out, and play it, and you'll get something special at the end. So
I love Easter eggs.
Yes, I love the tease for it too. You'll get something, and it might be the most amazing thing you've ever gotten. You'll have to wait and see. Yeah,
it's up to the user, I guess. So I actually originally didn't pick this, but we talked about it so much, I thought I'd better bring it up. So this is why I kept asking in the beginning to James about the new definitive agreement. Basically, Auth0 and Okta are coming together. So great blog posts on kind of what's happening in the world of authentication and authorization. So read the blog, and if you haven't heard of one of these two, I will be very, very surprised, and they're probably going to take over the world soon. So I'll throw that up as my other pick. James, I just want to personally say thank you so much. I know you and Brittney have some chats together too, so keep that going. You guys are rocking it. I love it.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it. Thanks for not introducing me, but putting me on the spot for a few acronyms that I don't use very often, making me sweat a little bit. But I think it worked out, so I had a lot of fun.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining
us. You stepped up to the plate on those for sure, easily.
Yeah.
Sorry for stressing you out.
All good.
So yeah, make sure to listen to the new podcast, CompressedFM, and you'll get to hear James's voice more often. All right. Absolutely. Thank you all so much. Thank you, James. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks, everyone. See ya.
All right. Take care.